Okay. Looks like we're finally live. Finally, looks like I may finally have figured out how to go live using OBS software at the same time, I hope. Uh, if there's anybody right now watching, then feel free to comment to say that you're actually here, to say that you can hear what I'm saying. I can't tell. I don't know if I don't know if things are working yet, but I'm going to assume they are, and if not, I'll just upload this as a as a regular video. But it looks like it's not. McKinley Street, what's up? Great to see ya. Okay, so looks like things are going well, so that's great. First, I'm sorry for being half an hour late. I know some of you won't care, of course, but you might, right? So sorry for being so late with that. I spent the last half hour trying to figure out how to actually do these things, how to figure out like how to stream and stuff like that. It's been pretty annoying. But it should be fine now. So there was a bunch of things that I wanted to talk about today. As always, of course, I'll take all your questions, comments, anything like that. I'll read them all. So you might know that I made a video on Saturday about how the many different benefits that freedom and a free society would or might bring. So check that video out. It's one of the only, there doesn't seem to be many things online about the actual benefits of freedom, aside from the idea of just, getting to do what you want. Well, I try to go into a lot more detail in that video, and it hasn't got a lot of likes yet, so, check it out, see what you think. So the other thing, the main thing that I really want to talk about today is the protests around the United States against the quarantine measures that the various governors have been implementing at the state level. I'm not really going to talk about Trump and his response to everything. I'll leave that for the other channels. This one, I'd like to look at a bunch of, to start at least, to look at a bunch of the different photos that I've seen and kind of talk a bit about them. Before we do, I just want to say something about authority, and it's very important for what we're going to talk about today in this context. It's going to be really important. So there are really two kinds of authority, and we tend to mix them up, and that's potentially really dangerous. The two kinds of authority are, first, an authority can mean someone who knows a lot about something, an expert, right? But authority can also mean the people in power. The police, maybe politicians, bureaucrats, that kind of thing. And those are, I think when you really think about it, those are two very different things. Now, we're getting told that that we should be questioning authority when often we don't have the tools to question authority. Now, I've been studying, let's say politics. I've been studying politics for a long time, so I have a certain mental tools to question, like what a politician says, for example, right? But as somebody who's not like an expert in, say, microbiology, then I don't have as much in the way of tools to question what the experts or so-called experts are saying about COVID, about the coronavirus. Now, one thing I can do is at least listen to them and listen to other people in the field, and if what they're saying is matching, that doesn't mean that it's true or that that we have to listen to them or anything, but it does mean that if they really are experts, and if they don't have, like, some kind of financial interest in lying to you, then there's probably a good chance that we should listen to them. And I think that's a pretty obvious in the case of our lockdown, our quarantine that we're in. Like, it's not necessarily that you can't do any of the things you usually like to do. Just, don't go too close to people. Stay a couple of meters away. Maybe wear a mask, and like gloves and that kind of thing. I mean, I was helping my friend move yesterday, and and there were a group of us, and we were all wearing masks and gloves while we were doing it. That was okay. I think that worked out pretty well. It wasn't so onerous that we would have had to go on strike if we were being paid for it. I'd like to look, in this context, I'd like to look at some of the photos that we've seen, and I say I've seen, but I'm sure you've seen most of them too. But let's take a look. Some of them are memes with, like, good takes on this kind of thing, and a lot of them are kind of just protest signs and so on, and we're going to talk about those. I think it's pretty important, so we're going to look. So, the first one, talking about these protests. If you want an example of how housebroken Americans are, right now there's mass protests in several states. They aren't demanding rent freezes or UBI or health care, stuff that would be good for them and good for everyone. They're demanding the right to go out and die to keep making the ruling class richer. It's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. There's so many things to protest in the United States, and they're protesting the one thing that the government's doing that would actually keep them healthy and would prevent them from spreading, this deadly virus around. So let's look at some of the things that they've been saying, and these are from various places. I'm not sure, if this one's from Michigan and one's from Ohio and so on. They're really from different places in the United States. And they were, coordinated for this past weekend, for anyone who doesn't know. This is a picture of them trying to get in. I'm not sure which kind of building it is, but it's pretty sad because they really do look like the Walking Dead here. And they will be. There's this guy. COVID-19 is a lie. And I'm sure they're not saying that, like, everything about COVID is a lie, but, they are going to say that it's not such a big deal, so, go to work. Don't worry about it. I think that is a really dangerous thing to spread. You have this kind of people. Some of these pictures are just plain funny. This one is definitely a funny one, I would say. This, I mean, I don't think I have to explain why this is funny. Okay, so then there was this. Alex Jones showed up to one of these protests, not really surprisingly. I think if Alex Jones is at your protest, you've really got to start thinking twice, but okay. A lot of the signs that we saw are something like this. End the shutdown. Open up all the businesses again. And a lot of them said these kind of very American cliches like give me liberty or give me death. Or in this case, give me liberty or give me COVID. You would think that was a counter-protest. I mean, really, like, give me liberty or give me COVID. I don't mind staying at home for a little while as long as I, and more importantly, the people around me, don't get COVID. Like, why? Whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's a death cult, like McKinley says. This quote from Benjamin Franklin, those who would give up liberty to purchase safety deserve neither. They know all of these slogans because that's kind of all they know, but this kind of thing is not, like, is this really how you want to exercise your liberty? Spreading a virus around and possibly dying from it, or if not you, then someone near you? And this, of course, is hilarious. Give me liberty or give me death. She was actually, it doesn't say in this picture, they've cropped it a little bit, but it's actually, she's in front of a Baskin Robbins. And it's funny because it makes you think that her idea of liberty, and it may well be, is the liberty to go to a Baskin Robbins, or like other people, other signs have said, like, let me get my hair cut, something like that. Really? Like, this is... Can't you wait? Can't you let your hair grow out a few more months? Or maybe just shave it like mine? I don't know. My civil rights are essential. Constitution is essential. Well, the Constitution, I've made a video about that. If you don't know much about the Constitution, you should definitely check out my video. But civil rights, if your civil right is to go out and infect people with a virus, then I don't know if it's essential. Yeah, maybe your civil rights mean to go outside, to go to work. I don't know if that's such a right that you really want, but that's what they're protesting for. Yes, I prefer this too, but I'm not convinced that actual protesters believe in liberty themselves. Nor do I think they believe in danger. Americans are especially white Americans, they're extremely panicky, and whenever there's a danger, they go out of, they do all kinds of things that a kind of a rational person would not do, like buying up every roll of toilet paper, for example. And they also have made it clear for years now, for decades really, that they don't believe in liberty. They might believe in their own liberty to leave the house. That's for sure. Because they care about their own shit. Yeah, exactly. My civil rights. Yeah, so that means I don't have to care about anyone else's safety. Exactly. I mean, why is that really what we want? I'll zoom this one in 1 sec. Again, freedom is essential. If you're not sure why they keep saying essential, I mean, a lot of you, I'm sure, are Americans and but if you're not, they're saying it's because they're saying essential workers should go to work because they're essential. But if you were non-essential, if it's not necessary for you to work for the benefit of everyone else, I guess, then stay at home, right? These folks are saying my constitutional rights are essential. I'm not really convinced that your constitutional rights mean anything at all. And if they do, where's the right in the Constitution for you to, like, go around and go to work during a pandemic or something? I don't think that's in the Constitution. Freedom is essential, okay, yeah. But then, were you also protesting all the other, like, countless violations of freedom, of yours and other people's freedom, that have been going on for years and years now? Because I think what you mean is convenience is essential. What you want is not to be inconvenienced. We'll go into that later. This one's pretty funny. Freedom trumps the commie virus. Okay, yeah. It's totally a communist virus. In fact, it was probably made by communists. Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, China is not communist, and I guarantee the person who made this sign doesn't know what communism is at all. But, a lot of these people, they're saying all kinds of things about communism. China lied, people died. Yeah, it's all China's fault. Simple, right? When you got someone to blame like that. It's China's fault. Yeah, notice the Trump 2020 cap on, so it couldn't possibly have been that, Trump and his guys lied. None of them lied, of course. And thanks to, it's partly thanks to Trump and his tweets and speeches that these people are even out in the streets endangering other people's lives in the first place. So this is one of those weird things that conservatives do. It says 9 million people die from starvation each year. The conservatives don't even usually consider an argument. They kind of jump. I used to be like this too, by the way. They kind of jump to a reason why, yeah, but what about? Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? And it's always some bullshit excuse. Like you could say, the police are killing people in the streets, and they'll go, yeah, but what about abortion? That kills millions of innocent babies. It's like, oh, God, okay, thanks. Like, they're really not the same thing at all. 9 million people die from starvation each year. I don't know if that figure's accurate, but the real point is it relevant? And also, like, what have you ever done for starving people? This guy. Like if you care about, starving people, you care about people dying. So presumably, you don't want them to die from COVID either. Whatever. This solution is worse than the problem. Maybe. But is having to stay at home really worse than the problem of getting sick and dying? Is it? I mean, I know they're talking about going to work, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I mean, really, even that, they're not even talking about going to work. They're talking about getting paid for going to work because they need money, and so on. But again, we'll talk about that later. We will not comply. Okay, so let me ask you this. When have you ever said we will not comply before? That's what I want to know. Is it only now that you personally are bored and inconvenienced and stuck at home? Would you comply with the police and so on all other occasions? Because you maybe respect the police, or maybe, a lot of these people, of course, they say things like, we will not comply and we believe in freedom, and but they worship like Trump and the police and the military and stuff. Like who do you think is going to be forcing you to comply with anything? You always blame like the governor and stuff. This one, of course, is the most hilarious picture I've ever seen, maybe. Social distancing is communism. And I'm sure people here I don't really need to explain this to, but I might as well, because I have explained it to one or two people over the past couple of days. So social distancing means keeping your distance from people, and this person is apparently saying that being forced to keep our distance from each other in the time of a pandemic is communism. Now, what she means by communism, or they, I should say, what they mean by communism is, of course, totalitarian rule, which it absolutely isn't, and that's not what communism is anyway, but of course that's what Americans, a lot of Americans think it is, because they're not interested in learning. They just heard something, everything that I learned in high school was correct and accurate, so, that was communism. It's communism. Everything I don't like is communism. Bunch of commies. Same with this. Stop the police state, right? The police state. Okay, yeah. The U.S. has been a police state for quite a long time. In fact, if you're black or indigenous, it's always been a police state. And these people, now that they're inconvenienced, now they're protesting a police state. Now they're protesting the police state. And they're not really. I mean, they say, it says police state, but I mean, where are the protests, for example, against ICE? Where are the ICE protests? I mean, if anything makes it a police state, it's this this Gestapo that tries to root out undesirables. But no, apparently that's not what makes it a police state. It's just, my inconvenience. Same with this, getting your tiny little kid to hold up a sign that says freedom over fear. Yeah, thanks, kid. And this is also the age where conservatives are going to post all kinds of memes about like socialism and communism, making all kinds of bullshit up about what those terms mean, and this is maybe the funniest one, Now, again, remember, they have no idea what the terms mean, and they're kind of just making it up. So they think socialism means curfews, food limits, suspended privileges, getting told you can't shop, can't get medical help. Well, no. Socialism doesn't mean any of those things, really. Arrested for going to church, government ruining your life. These are normal things under capitalism and dictatorships. And I mean, how could it be socialism in a capitalist system? These people really have no sense of anything. This is just plain confusing. The answer to COVID-19 is Trump 2020 with little Q signs over the O's for the 20. That's just plain confusing. I mean, Trump, has he beaten up other viruses before? I don't know. He's certainly not done much for this one. But somehow he's the answer? Okay. All jobs are essential. He probably also says, all lives matter. No, all jobs are not essential. That is complete nonsense. In fact, really, only a few jobs are essential. I would say probably fewer than 50%. And this also brings up the idea of a job, that we need to start thinking beyond getting a job. And yet these people are conservatives, and they've been told their whole lives that that's like their whole purpose in life is to get a job, and that's the way out of, or to stave off, poverty, and that's the solution to everything, is just get a job. So, I need to go back to work. You don't need to go back to your job. You need to be able to survive. That means food and shelter. Well, I'm sure you already have shelter. So maybe the point is that it should be free so that you don't have to be on the brink of bankruptcy because of a pandemic that you didn't cause. Same with things like food. Food is still, the price of food hasn't changed even though everyone's wages have gone down. Same with this. Let me work on the left, and the one on the right, I'm sorry, it says, let us think for ourselves. I'm not convinced you're doing that. Sorry. If you were thinking for yourself, you would probably also be reading up on how infectious this virus is and how potentially deadly it is. But maybe to your average American or conservative American, maybe thinking for yourself just means rejecting authority out of hand. And that brings us back to what I was saying about authority before, that they think that, authority said something, therefore, they're probably just a bunch of eggheads. Maybe they're working with the governor to... This kind of thing is not helpful. And it's not thinking for yourself. Same with this one. It's not about Trump, it's about feeding my family. See, I mean, this isn't really a funny one. This is just one of the ones that are all about work. I want to work. Really, again, you need to eat, and that's different. But they're all, being conservatives in most cases, or something else, something similar, let's say. Again, they can't really think beyond get a job or keep a job. and get money from that, and that's life. Like, that's the normal way of living. That's the only way to live. They've been convinced that everything that's the American way to live that they grew up with must be the right way. It's the correct way. I don't want to accept anything from the government because that's commie socialism or something. Earning a living is essential? Well, no. Food is essential. Pretty sure she wrote this one wrong. If it please the king, may I go to work? I'm pretty sure it says it should be if it please the crown, but okay. This one's a bit funny again because, you know, she's saying like, oh, it's such a horrible dictatorship that I'm not being allowed to go to work. But again, I mean, you should be staying home in this kind of circumstance, you know? Don't go to work. And there's far more dictatorial, authoritarian things that your government is doing, or that your work is doing, for that matter. I mean, when was the last time you protested shitty wages and conditions at your work and long hours and so on? When work stops, values decay. Nope. Sorry. Okay, so that's most of the pictures that I found. There's a couple of Twitter takes that I thought were worth looking at. For example, the one they're talking about, the one in Michigan, and if you don't know, over the weekend in Michigan there was like bumper to bumper cars protesting. At least I think it was over the weekend. Might have been a few days before. And this guy says, this whole gridlock protest in Michigan goes to further prove me that what appeared to be a disagreement about BLM, Black Lives Matter, tactics was actually a disagreement about the issues BLM raised. And yeah, that's absolutely true. Blocking, they're not only were they blocking traffic, like you can see a video of them blocking like an ambulance and so on. You know, an ambulance driver like begging them to move. Now, whenever like Black Lives Matter protesters did that, these same, you know, maybe not the exact same people, but the people in the same like Facebook groups that they're in were sending out pictures saying like, all lives splatter, feel free to drive over protesters and so on. Now the shoe is on the other foot because they have this very misguided protest. And it has nothing, you know, they're adopting the same tactics, and they would still never countenance being able to say that Black Lives Matter. Now, I included this one because this is like two protests at once. You can see the nurse on the right blocking traffic, and the person implying land of the free. Again, just another empty slogan that conservatives latch onto because it's the U.S. has hardly ever been free. You've got this badass nurse protest, and people are saying, get out of the way. We have our protest. We don't recognize your protest. And that's why I wanted to share this take, because I think this is pretty good too. It says, once the pandemic dies down, a whole load of nurses are rightfully going to go on strike, demanding compensation and reform. See, it's happening even before the pandemic has died down. And the risk that they've been put through, and the public discourse is going to switch on a dime from heroes to selfish, crazy unions. You watch. And I think they're absolutely right, because that's how it's always been. I mean, this is just a person learning from history. It's really all that's happening here. We support nurses and doctors and so on in the abstract, but they're so kind of manipulated by the corporate media that they're going to say, yeah, but that doesn't mean we should give them more money. They make enough money already. And if they don't have enough PPE, then they should do this or or get another job or something. I mean, they'll probably say that. Oh, you don't like your pay? Get another job. Something like that. You'll see. You'll see. I totally agree. This one I thought was really funny. This one's more just comic relief than anything. I don't know, I guess it shows something about conservatives and their whole fear of the word communism, and how much they understand communism, but whatever. CNN headline, South Korea will begin sending 600,000 COVID-19 test kits to the US as soon as tomorrow afternoon, an official with South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs tells CNN. Seems good, right? That's good, isn't it? Thank you for helping us out, would be the nice thing to say. But someone here says, we don't want those damn communist test kits. We should be making our own #coronavirus truth. And someone says, South Korea isn't communist. Someone else goes, South Korea's been communist for over 400 freaking years. How about you read a book before tweeting? It's just plain funny. It's just funny. Just too silly. But this one maybe made the most sense to me. Anyone else find it funny how the same crowd that loves cops, ICE, the TSA, the Patriot Act, stop and frisk, random DWI checkpoints, etc., are bitching about stay-at-home orders because now it affects them? Or is it just me? Shoot, I love all that police state stuff when it happens to poor and or brown people, but it weren't never supposed to apply to me. And that is so freaking true. If one of those protesters had ever protested all the real curbs and threats and reductions of their freedom that have been happening, let's say over the past 20 years, when, judging by the look of them, all of them have been awake and aware adults, if they had protested those things in any way that didn't just involve their own convenience, then maybe I would take them seriously. This one's almost right, this tweet. It says COVID-19 so far. Unskilled workers proving essential. In other words, they're known as unskilled so that we can give them low wages, but of course they're not actually unskilled. CEOs proving useless. That's always the case. Their job is to take money in any way they can and give it to the directors and the shareholders. CEOs proving useless. Socialism keeping the economy going. Okay, well that's the mistake here. It's definitely not socialism. I think what she means is government bailouts, government handouts. Of course, that's not what socialism is, and if you think it is, you might want to check out some of my videos. Immigrants keeping our NHS going. NHS is the National Health Service in Britain. Muslim doctors giving their lives. It's almost like this pandemic is single-handedly destroying every right-wing prejudice. Well, it's certainly not destroying their prejudices. It's showing to everybody that those prejudices were bullshit and baseless, and always have been. But most people don't want to see things even if they're right in front of their eyes. And finally, this awesome meme that I just found an hour ago. Today's bitch-ass leftist children will protest anything. 68,557 overdose deaths in 2018, largest prison population in human history, Saudi Arabia is committing a genocide in Yemen, chemo costs $6,000, mass extrajudicial surveillance of U.S. citizens, 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Real Americans only protest, I need a haircut, no sports on TV, can't go to the beach. Yeah, that's the slideshow, as it were, that I wanted to show you. I think I think these are very exemplary of the right and all the bullshit that they get up to and all the nonsense that that they'll tell you about. And this is quite typical. It's really, quite typical of these right-wingers. They have no awareness of any of the relevant fields of knowledge that you should know. I mean, they clearly don't know. It's not just not knowing what socialism is. That's one thing, but that's kind of a minor thing when you think about it. Really, I'd say there's two or three things that these protests show. Two or three kind of lessons that we can learn from it. First of all, I wouldn't want to assume that these protests are necessarily grassroots. Like a lot of protests that happen in the United States, it might be what's known as astroturf. You know, grassroots means like grass, right? Real grass. Astroturf is like fake grass. Again, to anyone who's not an American or whatever. Astroturf is fake grass, and so fake grassroots. So it could totally just be that these people are kind of either they're just being manipulated by people on the right, which is an everyday thing for them, or a lot of these protesters aren't even kind of the concerned citizens that they say they are, but they might just be bosses and so on who are saying, when they say like let us get back to work, they really mean make my employees go back to work so that I can keep making money. So there's probably some of that. I don't know how much. It's very hard to know, but there's going to be some of that for sure. It's always been the case. It certainly was the case during the Tea Party protests of 10 years ago. So it's all that stuff's come out since then. So there's a good chance of that. But even if we assume that that's not what's going on, I think it shows that there's a lot. This is a good example of the kind of American tradition, as it were, of anti-intellectualism. You have this very boring top-down school that you go to where you're told what to think. And it doesn't teach you to question anything. And there's a definite anti-intellectualism streak in American culture where people kind of assume that their ignorance about any topic is equally valid with your understanding of it. So yeah, doctors are saying stay home, but what do they know? The problem, I mean, it's okay to be skeptical of experts and authorities. That's great. Be skeptical. But your skepticism should be based on something. A lot of these people are just saying, look at this one inconsistency in something Dr. Fauci, or Fauci, however you say the guy's name, look at this inconsistency in something he said. Therefore, they're lying to us about everything. That's not skepticism. It's really just anti-intellectualism, which on its own is not really a wise thing. So this anti-intellectualism and these boring schools that just teach you how to think and don't teach you to question anything tends to lead to a kind of incuriosity about the world. And you think that, I don't have to learn anything to know what I need to know, which is really silly. So now they know nothing. So they're unable to distinguish between the two types of authority. You've got the police and so on who force you to do things, and they might say, that we're not going to listen to that kind of authority. And then you've got the other kind of authority who's saying, stay home for your own sake and for everyone's sake. And they're like, screw authority now. Now we won't comply. It's a very poor choice, and if you have no curiosity, no knowledge about the things you're talking about, and no interest in learning about them before you open your mouth, then you're gonna make some really bad decisions. Okay. That's the basics of what I wanted to say. And yeah, I mean, you folks are right, of course. That capitalism is the problem. Yeah, like what Derek's saying. Of course, capitalism is the problem because they live in a capitalist system, and they're saying that like socialism is bad, and they live in the United States, but China is the problem. It's so easy to deflect blame onto someone else. It's easy, really. Everything is someone else's fault. And these, of course, are also the personal responsibility people, right? They're the people who believe in, that you have to take responsibility for yourself. All right, is that what they're doing? Not really. And that capitalism like forces you to take responsibility or something like that. No, it just forces you into a really difficult, oppressive arrangement where you have to spend all your time working for someone else. And here they're so dependent on that system that they're saying, yes, please let me go out and continue to work for someone else instead of, instead of like, instead of saying we, okay, so I mean the ideal is what I've been saying like in my last video again, that that we can have it all, that if we own the product of our labor, and if we share all the things that we make, then there would be so much abundance, and society would easily be able to weather a storm like a pandemic like this, right? I don't think there's any doubt that it could weather a pandemic, even if like most of us had to stay in for a year or something like that. It's not necessarily a question of having to stay indoors. I mean, if you have the right equipment, you can go out and you can even go to your job, and work with everyone else, as long as you're distancing, maybe a mask, something like that. But those things aren't available because of this super inefficient capitalist system. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. McKinley Street mentions Fox News, and you're right. And I've been thinking about this. I can't figure out why Fox News is promoting some of these protests. I mean, I guess it's because they kind of want to be this faux grassroots conservative news outlet. Maybe it's got something to do with that. But it's also run by rich people who don't want all their potential employees getting sick and dropping dead. So it's hard for me to understand why Fox has, maybe just a little, but it seems to have been promoting these things, these protests. I can't figure that one out. I mean, maybe just because it looks like, just because that way it looks like they're, again, this kind of conservative grassroots news network, which like it only takes a few minutes of thinking about to realize that that's complete nonsense. But doesn't matter. Yeah, they're totally unhinged. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty weird. It's weird. It's really weird what's going on. But yeah. So what else was I going to say about that? Yeah, I mean, really, ideally, they should be joining in with, like with rent strikes. Think about if these same people put their energy into a rent strike. A lot of these people are armed and passionate, even if they don't really know that many things. If it could be explained to them that it would be good for everyone except the landlords, that really we would all benefit from this, then they could they could come on board, but that's not what they're interested in. And there's too much influence on their brains from landlords and from, their bosses and everything else. All the other rich people, there's so much influence on their thinking from these kind of people who are way high above them, and so they're just thoroughly indoctrinated. And I really don't think there's any way that we could reach them. I'd love to, but it just seems impossible. Really, we should be radicalizing their kids. Yeah, it's a total bootlicker thing. I certainly don't know if most stores are closed in the U.S. because I don't live there, but certainly a lot of the stores near where I live are closed. You can go out in the street a lot, but you don't really you don't see a lot of masks and stuff, but at the same time, people are kind of social distancing. Unless they know each other, they are keeping apart. So it's working out. And things like restaurants and bars and stuff for sure are closed. But a lot of the so-called essential things like food, well, not restaurants, but and the restaurants actually they're open too. Now that I think about it, they're all just doing delivery service. Yeah, exactly. They're protesting against their own self-interest. Please, exploit my labor more, right? Yeah, they could protest for their own self-interest. They could, legally required to wear masks. Huh? Yeah. They don't even need to protest exactly, because they could just be indoors, promoting their own self-interest. It could just be, going on strike, maybe a rent strike, but maybe like a work strike, tax strike. I mean, whatever you're against, whatever you don't believe in, I'd be okay with all those things. I think those would all be great. You could just stay at home and effect that goal, as long as enough people did it. Certainly if all these people did it, if they just kind of stayed home and said like, well, you can't force me. Because if there's so many people, then it's much harder for the police to do anything. They'll probably arrest a few people here and there, but it would be tough for them to arrest everyone. And they could stand in solidarity. They seem to kind of believe in solidarity, because they kind of, at least among like white right-wingers or something, they at least believe in that. The problem is that they don't believe in real solidarity with everybody and the issues that affect everybody. They only believe in their own convenience. Yeah, protesting in person is pretty dangerous, and I think this virus is going to spread a lot around the United States as a result of these weekend protests. So, will they stop protesting when the curve goes up more? That's an interesting question, because we know that they're pretty ignorant, right? We know that facts are not what's driving this kind of thing. So it could be that, like let's put it this way. If the curve goes up, but QAnon or Trump's tweets or something tells them that they should ignore the curve and ignore the data, then like most of them, I'm convinced, will ignore the data, and they'll say like, oh, that's just more experts telling us stuff, and I think so. At the same time, it's quite possible that they'll take a more wise, for lack of a better word, a kind of a wiser approach if like people they know are affected, if someone in their family, one of their friends gets really affected, but it might also have to mean, really harshly affected, die or something, because otherwise they might go, there, see, my friend had the Rona, and, he was in the hospital for a couple of days and he got out. Therefore, therefore, you can't infer anything just from that, except that, like, not everyone dies from it, which we already knew. I really think a lot of people won't change their mind, even if the curve goes up. There's just too much ignorance, too much anti-intellectual ignorance in the U.S. I mean, it's not surprising to me that they have so many cases, that all these other places have like all these other places have, like, lowered the curve, and these people, of course, they're just making everything worse, and it doesn't surprise me that that's happening in the US, because in a place like South Korea or Taiwan, they're not necessarily completely brainwashed or anything, but they do know what's good for them when it comes to, like, the spread of a virus. And so if the government is saying, like, you got to stay in home, or in their case it's more like you got to get tested, I think was more their strategy, although I haven't read too much about that. They'll go like, okay, yeah, I don't want to die, and so they've kind of accepted it, and I can see that. That's why I'm not surprised hearing, like, South Korea and Taiwan, their response has been great, their infection rate has been very low, whereas in the United States there's this cult of ignorance that it doesn't surprise me that there's so many people who are out there almost asking to get infected. Yeah. I think you're probably right about that. That, like, a rent strike, they know they could get arrested for it. Could be. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, and it's true, because a protest on its own isn't necessarily effective at all. Like it's like I've said before, if you just protest something, and even say you're demanding something, that doesn't necessarily mean you are actually demanding it. It means that you're saying what you want. The government doesn't have to do what you want. In fact, it hardly ever does. Whereas if there was, like, a rent strike, then that would inconvenience some of the wealthiest people. And so they, of course, would something would happen. I mean, it might just be lots of state violence, but it might also be reduction in rents or cancellation of rents. In fact, some of those things have already kind of started. But you're right. Like, if the means to get their freedom is more than just waving a sign around and blocking traffic, and they don't seem very interested in actual freedom and like militant action to get it. But I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, though. I mean, I certainly agree that they're afraid of a lot of things, and I think I think Americans, again, especially, they're so comfortable and complacent and used to having kind of the best of everything that it's easy for that to scare them over things like, say, terrorism, for example, because even though it kills hardly anybody, it's still it could come for them. It could come for you. The terrorists could come for you. So if they think they might be at risk, they're going to panic and run around like chickens with their heads cut off. And yeah, I mean that can teach us a lot of lessons, I think. Yeah, it's hard to say. We really, people on the left, like, we really have possible solutions, but when you're that indoctrinated and that incurious, you just don't want to learn about other things, then everything that could be called leftist or radical or extreme or whatever words are used to scare someone, that alone turns their brains off. No, that's a socialist idea. Socialism is necessarily wrong. Even though I've never read anything about it, socialism killed 50, 100 million, zillion people in the 20th century, and so on. It's not. It's quite bullshit. In fact, on that note, you may have heard that the what's it called, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation or whatever have added all of China's COVID deaths onto its death toll. So now COVID counts as communism too, because it's from China, right? Anybody who dies in China dies of communism. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They fear terrorism, which, like, there's no chance almost that you're gonna die. Like one out of a billion people die from that or something. Whereas a deadly virus that you could contract from the person next to you, you're not afraid of it. Yeah, exactly. Conservatism is about preserving the status quo. Exactly. You can see that in their rhetoric. Let me go back to work, right? Back to work. They're desperate. They're so dependent on the system, and they're dependent on this idea of normal. They're dependent on the normal, right? That like it has to be. They want to go back to whatever they think normal is, even if normal wasn't perfect. At least they were getting by. At least we were getting by, right? But it was never normal, and it was always oppressive, and we can do so much better than that. But unless we really work towards something better, it's going to get worse. And not in the sense of, like, there's going to be more lockdown or something, but like there's going to be, everything's going to get worse. The people with power are going to get more power and more wealth, and the rest of the people are going to get less and less. And your job and your salary is going to be worth less and less. But please, take me back to that. I depend on that. I need it. And even, in fact, you could even say that in the culture, yeah, you could even say that in the culture, they're not only are they expected to get a job because they think that getting a job is like being independent, when of course it's still very much dependent on the people with money, right? But they even think that, things like you're not a real man or something like that, or that, if you don't have a job, in fact, if you don't have the right job, you're not a real man and stuff like that, or you're just a parasite. You only want to live off others and stuff like that. And they've been indoctrinated with this stuff all their lives, so it runs so deep in their beliefs. It's the core of their beliefs. That's why get a job is their solution for every economic problem. Yeah, exactly. Like China, I wouldn't call China a socialist state or anything. It's just a state, really, and it's a capitalist state. But how can you pin all the deaths on them, right? It's like you're saying, it's ridiculous, because, like, you could make the argument that assuming that it really came from like a wet market or a live animal market in Wuhan, and it came from like a bat to a pangolin and then to a human, which I think is what the leading hypothesis right now. If that was really the case, then you could blame certain things on it. You could blame the people who stack, live animals on top of each other. I've read some articles that are saying that it's often, the regular people, and this I could vouch for from having lived in China to an extent, that like regular people don't buy like bats and pangolins and stuff for dinner. This stuff is for rich people and like high-end restaurants and stuff. So a lot of the buying that's going on in these restaurants, in these wet markets is rich people, or at least kind of middle-class people who want a treat. And that means that, while the people kind of in the market, people in the market might have an interest in kind of stacking things on top of each other to save space, but that's also pressure of the market. I mean, anybody in China who's not rich, their profit margin's going to be really low, so they don't exactly have the ability, the financial means to rent out lots of space and keep the animals nice and distant, that kind of thing. They're really just doing everything they can to scrape as many yuan together as they can, just to survive. And it's really hard in China. There's lots of poverty in China, and lots of people who are like, adjacent to poverty, one missed paycheck or something away from living in poverty. And again, I've seen it. I've seen millions of people living in poverty in China, and so you could blame like a few of those factors, but to say, to blame China is so simplistic and ridiculous. China is this huge country. Is it the fault of the entire country? How could it be? Is it the fault of the government? I mean, for not closing down these markets, maybe. But you could also say it's their fault for for having a monetary system where you're forced to cut corners and cut expenses. I mean, sure, but then we can blame all kinds of things on that problem in anywhere else. Certainly in the U.S., all the problems that causes in the U.S. Like it's not a Chinese thing; it's a capitalist thing. Most of us are forced to cut corners, and even people who aren't forced to cut corners will do it so that they can save money. So like the Chinese virus, the commie virus, please. These are just people whose brains are clouded with all kinds of nonsense and who aren't interested in learning why they're wrong. So that's, it's pretty ridiculous. Now, that's pretty much all I wanted to say for today. If you folks have any other questions or anything you'd like to ask, then that's great. We can do that. I'll give you a few seconds, but if not, I'll probably sign off for the day. Sorry again for being so late. I know I meant to start half an hour before I did, but I think I've finally figured out how I can do this right, how I can stream properly using OBS Studio. So it should work all right next time. I'm not sure if this is all worked out, if it's streamed properly, but it looks like it's been going pretty well. And so I'll be signing off then. So thanks everyone for being here. It's been great to have you. I hope you enjoyed stuff, and thanks so much for your comments and questions and stuff. I'm always happy to answer them too. So have a good day, everybody. Stay safe. Don't go around infecting people, but keep up your resistance even while you're online. See you later.